Imagine the University of Göttingen at the dawn of the 20th century, a place revered as the hallowed temple of mathematics. A slightly plump woman, her eyes radiant with a gentle light, stands before a lecture hall, passionately deriving complex formulas. Yet, it is almost impossible to believe that this woman, whom both students and faculty regarded as the zenith of intellect, did not receive a single pfennig in wages. On the official registers, she was relegated to the status of a free private assistant to a famous male professor. Her name was Emmy Noether, a name that Albert Einstein would publicly honor, and one upon which the entirety of modern physics stands, anchored by the concept of symmetry. Tonight, by the soft pulse of the firelight, let us traverse the path of her true life through this story. She was a mathematical saint who traversed the ramparts of patriarchy with grace and endured exile under the Nazi iron heel with equanimity. How did she bear years of such profound injustice? What inner fortitude allowed her to maintain an obsession with beauty in an age of despair? Let us, on this tranquil night, embark with her on a quiet odyssey toward the foundational logic of the universe. The fissures in her story began in the early summer of 1915 in a Berlin heavy with the scent of gunpowder. Albert Einstein was then enduring the most violent intellectual labor of his life. His general theory of relativity had encountered a massive logical chasm. The law of conservation of energy seemed to fail within the new fabric of spacetime. To a physicist in pursuit of perfection, this was nothing less than the collapse of faith. Two mathematical titans, David Hilbert and Felix Klein, were at their wits' end. They realized that their only savior was the woman regarded as an outlier on the Göttingen campus. By then, Emmy Noether had been laboring in obscurity within the mathematical world for years. With an intuition bordering on divine revelation, she unleashed a bolt of lightning that shattered the darkness, Noether's theorem. She revealed to the world that behind every conservation law in the universe stands a corresponding symmetry. Because time is smooth, energy is conserved. Because space is uniform, momentum is conserved. This was more than a mathematical formula. It was an epic poem dedicated to the underlying machinery of the cosmos. After reading her proof, Einstein wrote to Hilbert in heartfelt admiration, "Miss Noether possesses the most extraordinary penetration." Yet, when Hilbert attempted to secure her a formal professorship, the uproar within the university senate nearly brought the roof down. One professor demanded indignantly, "What will our soldiers think when they return to find they must learn at the feet of a woman?" Hilbert replied with helpless fury, "Gentlemen, this is a university, not a bathhouse." Noether met this with only a gentle smile, continuing to pen characters that would rock the foundations of time and space from her cramped, unpaid desk. If science was the pillar of her soul, then her exquisite gentleness was the shield she used to deflect the world's prejudice. During those years at Göttingen, Noether was like a lily blooming silently in a crevice of rock. She agreed to have courses listed under Hilbert's name while she taught them as an assistant, never once haggling over compensation. She was always seen in that oversized, somewhat rumpled black wool overcoat, its pockets bulging with scraps of paper covered in equations. Her students loved her with filial devotion, affectionately calling her Mama Noether. She cared not that her name was absent from the laboratories, nor that her titles were missing from the certificates. To her, mathematics was its own untarnishable reward. The perfect closure of an algebraic structure brought her a peace beyond understanding. She lectured on the complexities of group theory and ring theory as if they were rhythmic, ancient nursery rhymes. On cold afternoons, she would lead a troop of students along the wooded paths, discussing abstract concepts while chalk dust clung to her lapels like stray stardust. This ascetic restraint toward material life granted her a princely generosity of spirit. She shared her research insights without reservation, indifferent to whether the recipient credited her in their papers. In this state of ultimate purity, she constructed a kingdom of logic, a realm entirely free from the taint of gender discrimination. Yet the tempests of fate are never far behind. In 1933, black clouds completely occluded the German landscape. The Nazi jackboots shattered the tranquility of Göttingen University. A decree targeting Jewish scholars stripped Noether of her already tenuous right to teach. As the echoes of the brown shirt's boots rang through the corridors, many former friends chose the refuge of silence or even turned against her. Noether responded with a serenity that stunned all who witnessed it. There were no tears, no curses. When the Nazis stormed her classroom to announce her dismissal, she simply and quietly gathered her few scraps of paper, even pausing to gently remind her students not to forget their preview of the next chapter. In the weeks following her banishment from the campus, her apartment became the final sanctuary. In that cramped, dimly lit living room, young scholars from every nation still gathered. Huddled by the fireplace, their voices hushed against the piercing wail of Nazi sirens, they discussed the eternal truths of abstract algebra. She once told a student, "If we can maintain the purity of logic in this mad era, then we have not failed." This beauty of symmetry, maintained in the face of extreme injustice, was her most powerful counterstrike against a collapsing age. She was not fleeing reality, she was using a grander dimension to hold in contempt the fleeting and ugly machinations of power. The journey into American exile was bitter. Aboard the steamship crossing the Atlantic, she still carried her yellowing notebooks. When she finally arrived at Bryn Mawr College near Princeton, she was over 50 and utterly alone in a foreign land. The conditions there were far humbler than those of Göttingen, but she quickly established her own rhythm. Einstein, upon hearing of her arrival, was overjoyed. The two were often seen walking side by side through the campus twilights. It was an infinitely tender tableau in the history of physics. Two Jewish exiles who had reshaped the human conception of the universe, discussing the curvatures of spacetime and the cadence of numbers. In his later years, Einstein wrote multiple letters to the media, striving to make the American public realize that the unassuming elderly lady before them was the most distinguished mathematician of the age, without equal. During her final days at Bryn Mawr, she remained the kindly mentor in the old coat, speaking with a faint German accent. She continued to use her exquisite algebraic rings to embrace every soul feeling adrift in a strange land. Her life seemed to be a series of losses: loss of homeland, loss of faculty position, loss of recognition. Yet, within her conserved soul, for every worldly burden she lost, another ray of truth shone in. This ultimate equilibrium allowed her, even in the twilight of her life, to possess a clarity that remained undisturbed. In 1935, a surgery that was not considered complex became the final curtain call for this great woman. Albert Einstein personally penned her obituary in the New York Times, the longest and most deeply felt tribute he ever wrote. He stated, "In the judgment of the most competent living mathematicians, Fräulein Noether was the most significant creative mathematical genius thus far produced since the higher education of women began." Her life had been besieged by the walls of gender and exiled by racial prejudice, yet she never allowed those shadows to tarnish her logic. She proved that as long as the universe operates, symmetry will never vanish. As long as the soul thinks, dignity will never be extinguished. Our story tonight concludes. Emmy Noether now rests in a dimension where no prejudice exists, only perfect conservation. One hopes that in that realm, she has finally received the salary and the recognition that were a century overdue. Now, I invite you to set aside the heavy shackles of daily life. Let your breath become as light and balanced as Noether's formulas. In that boundless sea of wisdom free from discrimination and turmoil, you will find your own destination, an end to exile and a beginning of peace. Good night.